And so I think we are live now. So we'll see as some folks begin to join. And certainly I'm excited to be doing this with you.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. This is great. Thank you so much for organizing this. I think this is a super important conversation, and I'm really happy to talk to you and obviously work with the Latino Victory team.
Thank you so much. And so for those of you who are just joining, this is Catherine Pichardo, President and CEO at Latino Victory, an organization that builds political power so that our voices are and values can be reflected in the nation's policy and fiscal agenda. And I am very pleased to be joined today by a dear friend who's also a fellow luchadora. We've been in the trenches together on the campaign trail um, many, many times. Vanessa Cardenas, who is leading an organization called America's Voice. And as we begin, Vanessa, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, about the work that you do at America's Voice, so listeners can hear directly from you on the important issues you're working on.
Yeah, no, thank you again for having me. And this is, again, I think it's going to be a great conversation. And thanks to those of you who are joining to watch. So, yes, I'm Vanessa Cardenas, and I am a sort of like long-time resident in Virginia, which is why I'm excited to be in this conversation, given the results from the election this week. I'm originally from Bolivia. I came to the United States when I was in high school, and I don't know, by design or by luck, I ended up landing in Arlington, Virginia, which is a very progressive suburb in Northern Virginia. And I always say that because I feel like I was very lucky to land in a place that had a really strong infrastructure to integrate immigrants, and we also had a really superb educational system that had a really strong ESL program. And that's sort of where I think I was welcomed and embraced as an immigrant kid, but I was also where my sort of political education started. I got involved very early on in high school, and I'm just really grateful for the mentors and the people that invested in me. And anyway, so that's kind of my original story. And when I was graduating college, um, I was like, my dream is to go work for Unidos or LULAC. Like that was sort of like my dream. And my first job out of college was with an organization called the National Immigration Forum. And I got to meet like Cecilia Munoz and Raul Izaguirre and Maria Echeveste. And that was just like, for me, that was the mountaintop. That was like my dream. And then, I met people like you, and I worked in campaigns and I work in think tanks and just always in the political policy advocacy space. And immigration kind of has been sort of my through line through all the jobs that I've had. And now I'm at America's Voice, which is an advocacy organization based in Washington, D.C. America's Voice was founded with the goal of creating the political space and the political will for immigration reforms that legalize the 11 million. That was sort of the shorthand, right, for people that have been here many, many years, sometimes decades. Um, you know, that's the shorthand that we use, the 11 million, for like our North Star. We believe that the people that have been here for decades have earned the right to become citizens and a path to legalization. And we feel that we need to bring back the conversation on immigration in what we're doing to, again, provide a path to legalization and really embrace and support the people that have been here for decades, that are deeply rooted, that are contributing to our economy. So that's what we do. That's our North Star. And we support reforms, again, that brings legalization, but also that addresses the questions of future flows. How do we have a system that actually functions for the future, for economic prosperity? And the last thing I would say about our AV is that we believe that immigration is good, not just for immigrants, but for our country. And that immigrants have always been part of the American story, and they're essential to America's future prosperity. So that's our approach. We believe, again, immigration is good for America. We think that there are many immigrants in this country that are making huge contributions, and we owe it to ourselves as a nation to have a system that is worth of this country. That really reflects the values and our interests. And I think we can get there if we have the political will. Which is, again, I know we're going to talk a little bit about that.
We are, and I'm excited to look at the election results from that immigration lens. I would say that immigrants are not just part of the American story. We are the American story, right? That's how our nation was founded. So let's talk about the election, right? That everyone sort of was very um, anxious to see the results for, since in many ways it's a bellwether for what we're going to see next year in the midterm elections, and what we're going to see potentially in a presidential election in 2028. I know to folks it seems light years away, right? But the fact is that in political time, there's a 24 hours news cycle and things move very, very quickly. And so, from my perspective, what we saw on election day really was a rebuke of Donald Trump's agenda, in terms of policy, in terms of where the economy is, and certainly in terms of the chaos, right? Now we have the cost of living, which continues to go up, inflation, the whole mishandling of the tariffs issue, as well as, of course, the fact that we now have this Republican shutdown in Congress, which is putting people's health care at risk, people's food benefits at risk, and certainly many thousands of federal workers who are currently not receiving a paycheck and concerned about how they're going to pay their mortgages, send their kids to school, and buy food. So, within this context, I think we saw a clear exertion of power by voters across the country. In New York City, for example, where I am from, over 2 million voters came out. It's the highest number since the 1960s. We also saw huge voter turnout in New Jersey, in Virginia, in California, where Proposition 50 was on the ballot. In general terms, what do you think voters? What was the statement of voters um, on election day?
Yeah, and I think you got it right. I think that we were all nervous because obviously we are living in very, I think, difficult times, and sometimes it's hard to anticipate what's going to happen. But I think the message on Tuesday was a complete repudiation of the Trump agenda, and we saw across the board, right? Women voted Democrat. Young people, were the ones that pushed Mandami across the line in New York City. We saw the non-college voters also came back to Democrats. And of course, Latino voters that, I think they very strong message that this is not what we signed up for. So I think that's really important, an important message, and really, I think, good news for Democrats because it is presenting an opening. Um, and I think, like what you said, I think the biggest driver is the economy. And those of us that follow Latino voters know that the economy is always a top issue. It has been a top issue consistently for years. Is the economy, education, and healthcare are usually the top three issues for Latinos. But I think, especially this year, you have the added layer of immigration that has always been very close to Latino voters' hearts. But I think what's different this time around is the sheer cruelty that Latinos are suffering today, and the realization that it doesn't matter whether you have been born here or whether you have been here decades, that this administration is sending the message that you don't belong. So I think that what we're seeing is just the Latino community, Latino voters saying, this is not what we signed up for, this is not okay. And it's a repudiation of the mass deportation agenda. The other thing I just want to say is that, in the exit polling that we have seen, and of course, more analysis is going to come out, but in the exit polling, we have like 63%, for example, of Latinos saying in California that immigration actions have gone too far. Oh, I'm sorry, this is all voters, not just Latinos. In New Jersey, same thing. We have like almost 60% saying, this is way too far, 59%. In Virginia, we have 56% saying it's gone too far. So I think the message is it's too far. We don't like this. This is not okay. And on top of that, our economy is crashing. We're struggling to make ends meet. People are not receiving their SNAP benefits. The government is shut down now for the longest time in history. So I think the combination of all those factors.
For sure. And I will say one of the factors in last year's election, if or I should say, if we were going to summarize some of the failures for the Democrats in last year's election, it really was messaging, tactics, and timing. Right? It was too short a runway at the top of the ticket in order to make a successful race. But in terms of the outreach to Latino voters, did you see anything different this time around in terms of how the candidates and the campaigns reached to Latino voters? I know, for example, in New York City, Mondani had great commercials in Spanish. Tons of outreach was done on the field to Latino voters. The same in New Jersey. As a matter of fact, the campaign had a Latina co-chair. I know in Virginia as well, and certainly in California, where we have a very, very large Latino population. What can you say about Latino voter outreach and engagement this cycle that wasn't done last cycle?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. And I always commented that we have so much more work to do in having, the real investment that we need in our community. But I will say that living in Virginia, I did see a lot of outreach earlier on that I hadn't seen before. And there were a number of Latinos who were working with the Spamberger campaign that I think really made a difference. And in Virginia, we also have a great candidate, Elizabeth Guzman from Manassas, that, she also is an amazing, in addition of being a great legislator, she's also an amazing organizer. So, and I think that helped. So I think the combination of having really a strong ground game, having a strong message, which I think Democrats this time around had, and having good candidates that represent those communities, in addition to having the political staff, the staff to do the work, it's the combination to do this. And of course, we also had Trump, which in a way is a great motivator. Um, right? But I think that again, I think Democrats, at least from what I saw in Virginia, like Dolores Huerta was here a couple of weeks ago, organizing the community. We had a delegate, Alfonso Lopez, who's also a very well known, long time elected here, going out there. We had people like Walter Tejada, again, local activists that really know the community and have been there all along, pushing out the message that Latinos need to come out and vote. So yes, I think again, I think there's we know what works, right? As Democrats, I think as candidates, people know what works. It's investments, it's relationship, it's speaking to the concerns that people have. Um, I think
And the timing matters. And you mentioned it because early investments are important. You can't just parachute into a community 30 days before an election and expect folks will vote for you. So to your earlier point around having those conversations early on in the cycle with credible messengers of course a good message is really key.
That's right. That's right. And I think the message this time around really resonated. Of course, I live in Northern Virginia, so we are definitely feeling the effects of the shutdown. The federal workforce here is really, really important. It sustains this entire economy. So having so many people out of a job with really uncertainty about what's happening or when they're going to go back to work. My own cousin, she works for the Department of Transportation, so this is very personal to folks. So I do think, again, the economic anxiety plus the violence that we're seeing in our communities with our community members being kidnapped is sort of what's really motivated the community. And again, I think you had in Spamberger, for example, in Virginia, she had a strong message. She also has sort of this reputation of being somebody who works across the aisle, given her national security background. And I think that is important, right? That we do have electeds that kind of show that they can work with the other side, but it has to be on policies that really help all Americans versus just a segment of the population.
For sure. And I think that that's a values driven conversation. I think to the extent that voters came out in large numbers. And as you say, uh, that having uplifting candidates was a large motivator. Many voters stayed home last cycle because they didn't feel engaged. Certainly, it's not what we saw this past election day. What do you think we need to do in terms of lessons learned? What do you think we need to do in order to win the midterms next year? And certainly from the lens of Latino voters, we know that Latinos are not only a powerful and influential voting base as the largest segment of eligible voters with growth for years to come, as many young Latinos age into voting age, become U.S. citizens, register to vote, etc. What do you think as Democrats we need to do in order to engage those new voters, disaffected voters, and also folks independents that perhaps maybe even voted for Trump last time, who now are, I think, as proven fact, persuasion voters, because we know that, for example, in New Jersey, there were at 10 counties that went for Trump last time that decisively voted for Mikey Sherrill this time around. So what's the lesson learned, and what do we need to do to win next time?
That's a really good question. Listen, I think Democrats need to give people something to vote for in addition of something to vote against. I think right now the message was, we don't like this. This is not okay. And I think that was a strong message. I think looking at the midterms, again, as it relates to immigration, I think like Latino voters, are going to want to know what are the solutions that you're going to bring to the table. The good news for Democrats is that what we know um, voters support, and this is across the board, Latino voters, non-Latino voters, is that voters want to reform our immigration system. And we also know they're not anti-immigrant, they're anti-chaos. What voters, including Latino voters, don't like is the disorder, the notion that nobody is, minding the store, the images of like this out of control border. They don't like that. They don't think that's okay. And it's also the question of fairness, especially for Latino voters. And Latino families that have been here many years, and they not getting a path to legalization while other communities have. So we just have to name that. So I think for the midterms, I think as it relates to the immigration issue, I think Democrats need to lean in and talk about their vision. And I believe that their vision is more aligned and more consistent with what voters want. And that is a combination of like, yes, we need to have order, and we need to have a process, and we need to have requirements. And we also need a path to legalization for the people that have been here a long time, the people that are deeply rooted, that have been paying their taxes, that are, working, that have, again, that are integrated in our communities. And I think if Democrats have that message, and they also show that they are actually doing things in Congress right now to move the ball forward in terms of condemning what this administration is doing, elevating the stories of the people that are being hurt by these policies, and also providing alternatives. I have been very pleased to see, for example, Senator Gallego present a framework on immigration reform. We obviously have incredible champions like Senator Padilla. We have members of Congress like Veronica Escobar, who again is an amazing leader from the border that understands this issue deeply, and they are working to provide ideas on how to move forward on this issue. So again, I the last thing I want to say, Catherine, and you will know this, right? Like our community is very pragmatic, and Latino voters are swing voters. I don't think you can ever say like, oh, they're going to be 100% with Democrats. People have to earn it, and I think that's okay. As an advocate, I think that's okay. I think that Latino voters are also coming into their power. The other thing I would say is that um, I think this moment is a little bit like the Prop 187 moment in California, that really galvanized a generation of Latinos to become active and to just really go out there and made a huge difference in California, right, for years and decades to come. And I think this moment is kind of like that because Latinos are seeing that the damage that an extremist view on immigration can have on our community. At America's Voice, we've said that the narratives and this mass deportation agenda that Trump has been pushing has an ideology behind it, right? It's an extremist, nativist ideology, and
Hmm.
that movement is still there, and that Trump is a symptom of that. He's not the cause; he's a symptom of it. And even if Trump
And
goes
he's an
away,
agitator as
yeah,
well.
yeah, of course, of course,
Because the chaos helps him. It
yes,
distracts
it does. It's a
from his
distraction.
major failures.
Right. And he has the bully pulpit and he is, so, but what we have to understand is that policymakers or electeds that have that vision, that division, that kind of fan the flames of, you know, talking about invasion and great replacement theory, they can actually hurt our families, and we are not protected, right? As long as we look the way we look and we sound the way we sound, we're not protected. And I think again, what has been most really, I think, scary for our communities is that the Supreme Court is giving him the green light for racial profiling, right? So I think that what we're seeing in real time, what Latino voters are seeing in real time, is the real impact this kind of, uh, electeds have on our communities. Because many of them did not believe that he was going to do all these things. They were like, they vote. There are many Latino voters who voted for Trump. They didn't think he was going to do all these things that he said he would. But now he's doing it, and people are um, seeing it in reality. And to what you said earlier, right? That's why we had a bunch of Trump voters that went back to Democrats, right? So they gave him a chance. But again, I think that in terms of again, immigration reforms and what we need for us, it's a really important moment. We need this message to be sent that this is not okay, that this is not normal. We should not normalize it. And I was really pleased as an advocate to see again Latino voters coming out and saying this is not okay. um, the challenge, for 2026 is to sustain that engagement for Latino voters, to make the contrast really clear, and for Democrats again to lay out what they're for and how they're going to fight for this issue and in this community, which again is really important.
Absolutely. And to your point earlier as well, in terms of also delivering on what we're saying we're going to do, because I think there's also a disenchantment by voters that often folks promise over promise and under deliver. So I'm hopeful and I am energized by the election results that we're able to get back on track to win back the House, win back the White House, and hopefully have an opportunity to really deliver on an agenda that's long overdue. Um, so last question, because I know we're running into time. What's the lesson for Republicans from this election? Do you think these congressional Republicans will grow a spine and put some checks on Trump?
You know, I, again, coming at this issue as an advocate, immigration used to be a bipartisan issue. We had champions like John McCain. We had champions like Senator Rubio, right? Former Senator Rubio, that were sort of part of the Gang of Eight that really embraced this notion of immigration reform. So I think the message from Latino voters to Republicans has been very clear. I think that they were very they I don't think they understood how damaging this whole mass deportation agenda was going to be for Latinos. I hope they grow a spine. I think that the only ones that can slow down what Trump is doing in terms of damaging this community and their prospects for support is if they stop Trump and Stephen Miller from implementing their agenda. I think it's hard to see whether they can pivot because again, as long as Stephen Miller is in the White House in the president's ear, I don't see how he pivots. But I think it's incumbent on Republicans to stand up to him, to push back, and not just on electeds. Like I mentioned earlier, the Chamber of Commerce used to be a great ally of reforms. Where are the business voices? I mean, this is their future, right? When we talk about workers and the need for workers for our economy, so where is the business community? How are they standing up? They have the power, they have the influence. Why aren't they? So I think that Republicans need to grow a spine and stand up to this administration for the benefit of all of us, right? So I think that's the message. But I'm not holding my breath, right? Because it sounds like Trump really has a lot of control, and again, I just don't know how he pivots. But I would hope that at some point Republicans stand up, and otherwise they're going to continue. Again, I don't ever want to say this is exactly what's going to happen because again, voters change their mind, things change, situations change, the economy could change. But I think that in general, we're seeing that the GOP brand has been really hurt by the Trump administration.
For sure. And the proof is in the pudding. The election had very clear results. I like the way it sounds in Spanish. El resultado de las elecciones fue contundente. So thank you so much, Vanessa, for joining us. I really appreciate your leadership and all the work that you're doing. Keep it up. We need to keep the pressure on. And also, as it relates to the government shutdown, I think the pressure needs to be on. We need to get people back to work. We need to get America back to work, so that we could all grow into a better future. So thank you for all you do. Thank you to those of you who are listening. And as always, I leave you with best wishes for a wonderful week, wonderful weekend. This is Catherine Pichardo, President and CEO at Latino Victory. Thank you again for joining us. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.